Hey dudes and dudettes, it's me, E.H. Ivins, and this is another edition of the Radical Reset. Boys and girls, dudes and dudettes, ladies and gentlemen, people who follow what I say, people who think I'm completely full of shit, all of you who ever surf in to even take a peek at what I'm saying, listen to this very, very carefully. Democracy, as we have understood it our entire life, has failed. It is past the point of no return. It is now feeding upon itself, and there is no getting away from it. Okay, so we are proposing an alternative system. And when I say we, it's the royal we. I am proposing an alternative system together with a few of you out there who find it at least interesting. But how would that system work, and how would it come to be, and how would we overcome the quote, that'll never happen, unquote thing that comes down the line? And the bottom line about it is this. Just think about it in overview as I go through today's topics. I'm going to get into the meat of today's advertised by thumbnail topic that you clicked on when you came over to watch me today. But before we get there, understand this. The entire world is going to decentralization except government. So just think about that for a minute. Think about Amazon and how it distributes its goods versus how Sears used to. It doesn't come from some central warehouse. It's a decentralized spider web of distribution centers all over the world that gets everything to you almost immediately. I mean, I clicked on dog food yesterday, and 6 hours later it was at my front door, and it's only going to get faster. Why would the whole world recognize decentralization except government? Because government is basically a class unto itself worldwide, not just in the United States, led by a venal, power-hungry bunch of sociopaths, basically. And when you think about it here in the United States, relating it to our own country, how can one city run by approximately 3,000 federal legislators, executive branch, and judicial branch people, and their bureaucracy that supports them unelected and answering to nobody, how can they possibly effectively run the infrastructure of our lives of 340 million people? And I'm telling you folks, this is why Donald Trump was elected president, although people don't really, it hasn't really gelled in the minds of the 74 million people who voted for him in the last election yet, but it will, that it isn't Donald Trump that they support as much as they resent the ruling class, okay? And the Republicrats, and they're both the same, Republicans and Democrats, so let's just call it Republicrats, who have basically conspired to create the military-industrial welfare state that we live in today. You know, the idea that it's democratic and that we have a voice and that our vote means anything is just ludicrous. So perhaps the time has come to consider to get to an anti-political government, which would be perfect, by the way. And if you don't know, let me take a break right now. If you do not understand the precepts of anti-politism and how this system works, simply go to Amazon right now, click on just go to Kindle, and I have put it up there free. Okay, you can, I'm assuming you're a Prime member, everyone's a Prime member, download A Radical Reset and read it. It is the manifesto of anti-politism. Now, even though it is free, Amazon has this master fund thing. So every time you turn a page, I get paid a little bit, which helps support this podcast and the movement. And you can also download the document if you wish to own it as opposed to borrow it. Or if you are a hardcover kind of person, it is available to you nominally on, when I say nominally, not for a nominal fee, in hardcover, or actually soft cover, but in print, I should say. But regardless, read the Manifesto of Antipolitism. It is a nearly perfect system. But we're not going to get there converting 340 million people, half of whom fucking hate the guts of the other half, and that's really simplistic. The truth is, all of our 50 states are widely different demographically. It's not just red and blue. You know, you can't make statements like California is a deep blue state. Well, listen, I lived in California for several years, and I'm going to tell you something. It is if you live in Los Angeles and San Francisco and that corridor, you know, south to north where the majority of the state's population lives. But if you really look at it, everything outside that little narrow coastal corridor is dark red. California is full of very, very Republican people. The problem is they're outnumbered by the small enclave packed with liberals on the coast. So let's not talk red and blue, but the country, certain populations have migrated predominantly certain other places. And when you really think about it, smaller is better in every way. Why wouldn't it be better for government? So maybe we should have the intellectual discussion of secession. I'm going to bring up the word. Don't think I'm a nutcase. Wait, I need to take a sip of water here just for a moment. I'm a little dry mouth. Consider this. California, going back to that state, by itself is the 7th largest economy in the world. If you took, for example, Illinois and Ohio together and they became their own country together, and today one's blue and one's red, but let's just pretend that, again, put those aside. Like-minded Midwest people decide they've had enough of Washington trying to control their lives, so they become their own country. Put Illinois and Ohio together, and their economy is larger than Canada. Florida's economy is larger than the entire country of India. Okay, in other words, and it's not just the size. Government people like you to believe that the reason that we need to stay a union is bigger is better. But and they point out how large our gross domestic product. Look how large our U.S. economy is together. Blah blah blah. But that doesn't mean shit. All that really matters is per capita income. In other words, what is the average income of each individual in the country? And by that measure, we are not leading the world. The richest country in the world is a city-state. It's Singapore. Now, Singapore has done everything right, except that it is an authoritarian state, not a democracy. And Lee Kuan Yew, who recently passed away, and now his successors have run the country, or the city-state, depending, it's like in Athens, a modern-day Athens with technology. And the government there are no protests against the government. Though it has very strict rules, it also provides a lot of freedoms as well. You should study Singapore. I'm not going to go into it here, but the point I'm trying to make is that Singapore, its economy and GDP is a tiny fraction of ours, but its people all live better and no one's attacking it. No one's invading Singapore. The Chinese aren't massing at the border. The Chinese are part of the population. There are a lot of Singapore Chinese. They have managed to mesh native Singaporeans with the Chinese immigrants and people from other parts of Asia, along with lots of Caucasians from Europe are starting to find Singapore. Let me ask you another question, just to point out the difference between, why GDP doesn't matter. India or Liechtenstein, where would you rather live? In other words, would you rather live in the smallest country in the world with a gross domestic product that's absolutely minuscule compared with India's billion people? But that sure doesn't tell the story, does it? And where would you rather live? Liechtenstein. We both know the answer to that. So just keep that in mind. We're going to increasingly talk about the possibilities of secession, something that used to be a fringe lunatic subject, but in fact is no longer lunacy, and we need to consider it as perhaps founding an anti-political state somewhere in America where it makes sense and where like-minded people get together and say, fuck this, we're not going to have ruling elites anymore. We're not going to have political parties anymore. We're not going to have money in politics anymore. And we're not going to have the government in any way, shape, or form try to run our lives. And oh, by the way, we're going to be neutral, and we are absolutely neutral, taking no sides against anyone, and therefore need no military industrial complex. I'm not saying we don't defend ourselves, and I'm not saying we don't adopt the Second Amendment that's part of the Constitution of our new country, where everybody basically owns a gun, like in Switzerland. So go ahead, try to invade us. Fuck you. You'll die everywhere you stand. But all of that aside, and I don't want to go surfing off, we're going to start talking about getting the fuck out of here, because the crash is coming and it's going to be terrible. And those of us, we need to find traction in the country, get like-minded people together, and then start talking about where we're going to put our anti-political state. We're not going to, the fact of the matter is, guys, we could sit down and argue with people, particularly that are idealistic, right or left. The people that aren't going to listen, where politics has become religion, we're not going to convince them. So let's just do our own thing and let them do their own thing. And who knows, if they're right, they'll do better than us, but I don't think so, since an anti-political state is also a free market state. Free market capitalism, the only system that's voluntary and has created real wealth in the history of the world, period, end of story. Want to debate? You lose. Okay, so let's move on to the subject. Today is a step in our way towards understanding why I'm going to make the arguments that I'm making, that I've just covered in overview now. And today's topic is God is to atheism as government is to anarchy. Now, I am basically an anarchist, but I know that anarchy is not coming. In other words, the best government would be absolutely no government at all, but we have to have a minimalist government, I suppose, because of both the mindset of people and the insecurity of people and the failure to consider that really we could all do this for ourselves. But I'm not, let's live in the real world. We're not going to drag everybody into the idea of utopian anarchy. So we'll hold it out there for us as the communist view, as the socialist view communism. In other words, communism is the goal of socialism that's never attained. There's never been an actual communist country, just socialist countries trying to attain communism, which is the goal. That's why the Soviet Union was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. It's not the Union of Soviet Communist Republics. So for us, anarchy is the goal. But we're so far. Maybe someday in a further evolved version of humanity, we'll get there where we don't have any leadership at all. But in the meantime, anti-politism is the step along the way. So God is to atheism as government is to anarchy is relevant to the subject matter. What I meant by this statement when I made it the title of today is that atheism is made necessary by the belief in God, as anarchy is made necessary by government. All government is corrupt. And the other isms that are available to us are bad isms. For example, socialism is to slavery, as capitalism is to skydiving. In other words, in a socialist country, you are essentially a slave. Now, look, I'm not trying to insult those of you, particularly my black viewers, who are going to take insult that I'm bringing slavery into this discussion, but we're all essentially slaves of a socialist welfare state, and that they are what is slavery but involuntary servitude to a master? And when they start confiscating your personal property, telling you what you can say, think, read, and cancel you if you don't, what do you call that? And those are all socialist/progressive, which is exactly the same thing, manifestations. They can try to label it any way they want, but a duck is a duck is a duck is a duck. Oh fuck. So anyway, the bottom line is that's all you can expect from a socialist system. The goal is equality. The equality is in the slavery of low expectations and underachievement and poverty. That's all that's ever come, and death. That's all that's ever come from socialism. But in capitalism, it's like skydiving. You can't have the thrill if you don't jump. But it's all done very safely. I mean, the people, if you go to the skydiving school, are going to make sure the chute is properly packed. But you're going to have a thrill and something that's going to last you a lifetime, and it's yours to do alone. But no one's going to push you out of the plane. You want to skydive, skydive. You don't want to skydive, don't skydive. You want to sit in your house and play it safe, that's great. You want to jump out of an airplane, which, by the way, I have done 5 times. It was the requirement when I was in the military. Because I was flying in intelligence missions, we all had to make static line jumps. It scared the shit out of me. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really a thrilled skydiver. After the 5 were over, they invited us, they being the people running the jumps, to go do a couple of free falls and get into it. And I said, go fuck yourself. I'm a licensed pilot. I like flying the airplane. I sure shit don't want to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. But if you want to, that's the beauty. The beauty of free market capitalism is you can jump out of the fucking airplane. And in socialism, the government would decide it's too dangerous, so we're going to put it out of existence because there's a chance you might get hurt. It's all for your own good, so shut the fuck up and be a slave. God and socialism were created by culture, and the point I'm trying to make here is that socialism and religion are very similar, and that's why we're never going to reunify the country. God and socialism were created by culture, while freedom and risk are our natural state. Okay, think about that. We are all born free for a moment before the state, begins to suck our lifeblood out. And risk is life. I mean, security is an illusion, guys. That's why we never achieve it. The reason we're constantly surprised by the next horrible thing that happens, from people shooting out of Las Vegas hotel rooms down into country music concerts, or, 9/11 type disasters and everything in between, is because security is an illusion. It's all an illusion. Life is a risk. It's our natural state. So when we come up with systems like socialism to try to eliminate the risk in life, all we end up doing is imprisoning ourselves. Okay? Isn't that what God was all about? The whole idea came up culturally before anyone knew how the sun, how we revolved around the sun, or that the earth was round, or what gravity, there was no science at all until about 150 years ago. None of that was science. So people just came up with this bullshit story, but then they imbued God with all of these attributes to try to herd people, control people into a state of docility, and and millions of people still go along with this. And you can't argue with religion, guys. I'm probably insulting people now saying this, but here's the thing. I'm not trying. You want to be religious? Be religious. In a free market, it's a cool thing. But if you're in a theocracy like Iran, freedom of religion is not a fucking option. Just consider that. And that, freedom at all in a socialist state isn't an option, because the state for your own good keeps telling you what's for your own good from this little group of, in this country, 3,000 people in Washington, D.C., increasingly invading the lives of our 340 million citizens. Anyway, the United States Constitution is 250 years old, and it's been amended 27 times to date. It's going to be amended more when we add the anti-political amendments. But the Bible and Quran are 2,000 and 13 years old respectively, and they've never been amended. What does that tell you? Live your life by the United States Constitution, guys. It's a modern document. The other two are a bunch of bullshit. There's crazy shit in the Bible, there's crazy shit in the Quran, and no one's amended it. Some illiterate shepherd in the middle of the Palestinian desert comes up with this bullshit story of submission 1,300 years ago, and nobody amends it. Some crazy fucking Egyptian pharaoh adopts an Abrahamic concept into a single God religion and calls himself Moses. Next thing you know, he's handing down commandments, 4 of which have nothing to do with fucking people, just how to respect God. And then these books come out with these long fucking rules, including stoning homosexuals, among other absurd shit, and having angels rape your daughter. It's in the book. It's in the book of. It's the one about Lot, and the salt and all that kind of bullshit. Lot asked the angels who come to visit him, go ahead, rape my daughter, have a party. So all I'm pointing out is no one's amended these fucking documents. Why does anybody believe it? The great thing about the Constitution of the United States, though our government doesn't follow it, is at least conceptually it's modern. It is a living, breathing document. And when we take that document and we put it into our new anti-political states, and I'm going to call our new country, by the way, that doesn't exist, instead of the USA, the ASA, the Antipolitical States of America, a confederation. And I'm using anti-political states instead of saying a confederation or a confederacy because it brings up all those slavery images, which is horseshit. So we're just going to throw that, even though the word is perfectly good, the connotation is fucking horrible. So let's just stay away from it and just call it the Antipolitical States of America, states in a loose union of free trade among themselves in a neutral political stance where people are left to do their own thing, and the government, aside from policing and picking up the garbage, which they can privatize, and defending us from our non-existent foreign enemies, doesn't have much to do. It's an unimportant government, much as Switzerland. The country that I would most like to see us pattern ourselves after in an anti-political system is Switzerland, where by constitution, and by the way, you can read the Swiss constitution. If you go to the Swiss government's online site, beautiful that they are, the Swiss who do everything well, it's in 4 languages. So like English is among them. Read their constitution. They literally say the federal government doesn't know shit. We're going to push it all down to the states, which are called cantons. And then the cantons are thereby encouraged to push it all down to the communes, which is their word for their cities. So basically, 80% of a Swiss citizen's taxes are paid locally, and only 20% go to the national government. And in this country, it's 180-degree reversed. And ask yourself which makes more sense to you in a decentralized world. Wouldn't you rather? Don't you think that if you were spending 80% of your tax money locally, you'd be kicking a little ass and going to knock on the mayor's door saying, what the fuck are you doing with this? But see, in this country, because of these 3,000 fucking elitists in Washington, D.C., we've turned our local governments into nothing more than agencies of the federal government. The mayor isn't allowed to be the mayor. The mayor of my city, Kate Gallego of Phoenix, I don't know if she's a good mayor or not because she's so constrained by what she can and cannot do financially that it doesn't fucking matter what she does. But in Switzerland, she'd be the most important person in my life. And if I had a bitch with her, governmentally speaking, not obviously not the most important. The most important person in my life, or people in my life, is obviously my human family. And the second most important person in my life is my puppy, who is sitting right over there looking at me doing these podcasts, thinking to herself, what the fuck is he talking about? But anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the subject matter. Now, on the left, they're being dominated by the social justice warriors and their ilk. Largely female, but some men. But look, social justice warriors are emotional hemophiliacs, okay? These are people that aren't really feeling... they're not feeling offended or aggrieved, and there's no end to how they feel because they love to pose. They love the feeling of being noticed for what they're doing. They're just they're the living embodiment of the definition of narcissism. And because they love this, and because they love to be triggered constantly, they're hemophiliacs. They're never going to stop. So let's not engage them. Let them go form their own social justice state. Maybe the social justice state of California, or maybe the United States of America can become the socially just states of America. But those of us in the anti-political states of America, when we secede from this mess, because we're not going to fix what they've done, we need to get the fuck out of Dodge. We need to find our little and it doesn't have to be much. We could secede as a city. Again, look at Singapore, okay? All you need is free trade and capitalism, and the rest will take care of itself. Free trade and capitalism. Let everyone compete, win, lose, or draw. No Federal Reserve, no government-supported fiat currencies, just free trade and capitalism as it was practiced during the period when this country had its greatest growth, the 19th century, okay? And the rest would be out of the way. Okay. The Democrats, the Republicrats, one of their big appeals is, to envy. We need to have a graduated income tax because those rich guys, it's not fair. It's not fair that it's not fair. It's not fair. That's the problem with equality. What is fair? And what is equal? And who makes that fucking decision? But here's the thing. The reason this is falling flat, the reason those of us like you and I don't really buy into this shit is because we don't resent the rich. And you know why we don't resent the uber rich? Because we can see ourselves as rich. I mean, you might win the lottery, you might start your own business, you might have a rich aunt that dies, but one way or another, most of us out here can see ourselves as rich, even if we're not today. So we don't resent the rich, we aspire to it. But at the very and we understand that the economy is not a casino. It's not. There doesn't have to be a loser for every winner. Everybody can win if you're smart about it. And sometimes you fail, but it's from our failure that we learn. We don't learn anything from any other for any other reason but consequence, do we? Really? I mean, so you got to fail. And a lot of people get confused about this. We'll talk more about this as time goes on. I'm not going to go on and on and on. But I'll tell you who we resent. We resent the fucking ruling elite. And that's what Donald Trump was all about. Now, Donald Trump was the wrong man, but he was, as I've said all along, he was the wrong man elected for the right reasons. And there will be other Donald Trumps coming along. And where we're going to have to lead the country to good men instead, men of character. And when I say men, I use that term generically, guys, men and women, of character. Okay, it doesn't matter to me what race or gender or, whether. Another thing we're going to have in an anti-political state is we're not going to pick our leaders, and we're not going to pick, run our companies, and we're not going to run our daily lives based upon genitalia and skin color. It's going to be based on ability and outcome. And that's it. Period. Merit. If you don't merit, fuck you. All right. Anarchy is to free people as communism is to socialists. Just remember that, guys. Anarchy is to free people as communism is to socialists. Anarchy is probably unattainable. Perhaps someday when we are highly evolved future beings in our own state where no one's interfering with us, we could ultimately end up in an anarchy. But because the rest of the world is going to have governments, and occasionally they're going to become a pain in our ass, and occasionally it's going to have to be dealt with, we'll probably have to have some loose form of government for the rest of our lives. But we can hold it up as a goal, as the socialists have held up communism as a goal that has not been achieved. But there's nothing wrong with the goal. It just gives you something to shoot at. Just, it's like, speaking as a Jewish guy, every year until Israel was founded, and still in the Orthodox homes, they still do this. At the time of Passover, you would say next year in Jerusalem. Well, of course, we're in Jerusalem, and even the new Biden administration has acknowledged that Jerusalem is the capital of the United States. Of Israel, sorry. And that was not a Freudian slip. That was an ageist thing. I'm just, half dotty. Anyway, the point is, look, guys, let me stop surfing off. Let's get back to the point. We're not going to change the minds of the nuts. And we're not going to make the people on the left who are hell-bent on power and control and doing the right thing and being little snowflakes and being politically correct and canceling those that disagree with them and yada. We're just simply not going to change their minds. And, it's too far gone. It's too far gone. The end began, if you want to know the history of it, the end began in 1913. 1913 was the year that the Federal Reserve was created and the year that the income tax was instated. And once that happened, once the government made it legal for itself by constitutional amendment to basically confiscate your personal property, We stopped being a capitalist system, converted to a fascist system, if you want to know the truth of it. Putting aside the anti-Semitism, which as a Jew is something that I put aside very carefully, just for a moment, consider that we live in a military-industrial state that uses welfare as an opiate to the masses. What is that but a fascist state? Okay, what is that? We have been in a perpetual state of war, more or less, since the First World War, one after another. And you can sit there and tell me that World War II was the good war, but there would have been no World War II without World War I. And there was no reason for us to be in World War I because we had no national interest in it whatsoever. We just got caught up in the excitement of the whole fucking stupid thing. We tipped the balance. The world ended up with the Versailles Treaty. World War II was a continuation of World War I, caused by a meddling class and the most evil president in American history, Woodrow Wilson. And I can go on and on and on and on, okay? And, we don't want to spend the day doing it. But the bottom line is this. We're not going to change the minds of those that oppose us. Instead, let's say to them, look, we'll go our way, you go yours. Let's have free trade between us. Let's leave our borders open. You can come live in our country and we can go live in yours. But here's the thing. If you come to our country, there is no welfare state. There is no social safety net. Okay, it is a free country, free in every way, including free of politics, free of elections. Okay, oh, we have a democracy. Read the book. Read A Radical Reset. You will be enlightened. And I'm going to leave it there. Oh, except to say, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you haven't shared this with your friends, share it. And if you want to talk to me and get involved in the movement, look above my head, text me to the number above, the 844 number above, and we will talk about how to get you involved because, baby, the end is here. The party's almost over, and it's going to be fucking ugly. When I get done recording this podcast, I'm ordering more fruit. You're going to think I'm nuts, but I'm taking a leaf from the Mormons. I'm making sure that I have enough stuff stocked in my house for when the breakdown comes. Because, friends, if you learned anything from COVID besides the government has its head up its ass, isn't it interesting, by the way, slight digression, how the private industry developed 3 different vaccines in lightning speed, and now governments worldwide are fucking up the distribution? What is that? It's a case study if you're paying any fucking attention. Government can't do anything, even when it has months and months to prepare for it, and they see it coming a mile away. Fucking idiots. But anyway, we need to get this show on the road, gang. We need to form the movement. We need to get the hell out of Dodge, and we can trade with them, and they come live in our country. They're on their own, and we are neutral. We aren't getting involved in anybody's bullshit. You want to live in the military-industrial welfare state? That's the United States of America. You want to live in a free country where you do as you please, surrounded by people who think like you do and share those values, and a culture of politeness and discussion and comedy and voluntarism, and everything is voluntary, and your property is yours. That's it for today. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Joining us is not royal. Joining me, and until next time, this is your pal, E.H. Ivins, signing off.